Hey, good students. Good evening. Uh, I'm here holding out like everybody else. I hope everybody had a great Sunday. And I'm going to hammer out a little lecture so it can be ready for you in the morning. The continuing lecture of civil rights. Today we're gonna cover Mexican American civil rights. Okay. And one of the things I want to tell you about Mexican American civil rights, the first thing is that there is nothing cohesive in it. Basically, what you have is that you actually have several movements within a movement. It's not like the African American Civil Rights Union, Civil Rights Movement that was pretty cohesive. You did have a splinter group between, Martin Luther King and Stokely Carmichael, but at the end of the day, all of the organizations that were founded within those movements were pretty solid in themselves. After the death of Martin Luther King, yes, we do have some disintegration that happens and we do kind of take some steps backwards. But in the Mexican American Civil Rights Movement, the Mexican American Civil Rights Movement actually begins after 1848. Yes, I did say 1848 at the U.S. Mexican War, but you begin to see the disenfranchisement of of then Mexican landowners, even though they weren't promised that. It actually begins with the loss of Texas and then the loss of the Mexican territory. And the years really 1870 to 1900, 1920 are pretty dismal. They're pretty bad for Mexican Americans, especially in Texas. I mean, the killing of Mexicans in Texas reached epidemic proportions between 1900 and 1920 when it was not uncommon to find random Mexicans hung from trees. Sometimes somebody would come by and they would say, "Oh, it looks like the Texas Rangers have been by here." Again, the Texas Rangers back then were pretty much a private police force that preyed on Mexican Americans. So we really don't see anything happen until after World War II, and we'll have individuals like Hector Garcia. In 1929, though, we do have the founding of LULAC, the League, the Latin, the League of United Latin American Citizens. There you go. I always forget it. And that was actually founded by a woman. I have the name written down, Maria Hernandez and Pedro Barrera. Okay. Uh, And the one of the reasons that a lot of people don't like LULAC is because they conduct their meetings in English and they recite the Pledge of Allegiance. And they're also seen by a lot of more militant Mexican American individuals as accommodationists. Okay, but either way, it is the oldest Latin American, Hispanic, or Mexican American organization in the United States, and they do help a lot. Okay, my uncle Tony was the president of the chapter in Laredo, and they do a lot. Okay. Now, in 1848, we're going to have, after Hector Garcia comes back from the war, Dr. Hector Garcia, um, they found the American GI form. Okay. And that one also had a woman. It was Dr. Garcia, uh, Yvonne Carrillo, and Angel Gonzalez that found it. Now, the American GI form is going to be very effective because it's the American GI form that is going to go after discrimination cases. And they're actually going to, um, in the Felix Longoria case, I'm filming at night, so there's a lot of bugs and stuff. In the Felix Longoria case, where they would not allow a Mexican American who had been killed in the Philippines uh, uh, have a rosary in a chapel because he was Mexican. And one of the things that they find out, one of the things that uh, Hector Garcia is going to find out under the American GI Forum is that you've got to tackle desegregation, because if you don't get desegregation and the enforcement of desegregation, then Mexican American children are not going to have access to an education. And if they don't have access to an education, then they're not going to become lawyers and doctors and, congressmen and senators and or whatever it may be. So that's really, to me, the American GI Form is very important in the sense that it started the trend of desegregation in schools. Okay. Now, when we talk about desegregation, a lot of times we always talk about Plessy v. Ferguson and Brown v. Board of Education. But Mexican Americans were doing this prior, and I've said in other videos, we have Hernandez v. Bastrop, we have Mendez v. Westminster School ISD. You have a lot of cases that start coming up where individuals begin to challenge that. I was a child that lived in a housing project, and we would get bussed into the better school district. So the idea back then was that these other wealthier kids would uplift us, that we weren't, poor, not, smarter kids. It actually created big feelings of inferiority because they had better stuff than we did, and there was no way that we can compete against them. That's a story for another day. Now, in addition to that, you're going to have a couple of greats that I call Chicano greats or Mexican American greats. They all don't agree with each other. You have Reyes Lopez Tijerina, you have Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez, you have Cesar Chavez, okay, and you have Jose Angel Gutierrez, which I consider those the big four. And then amongst women, I consider the big two. Now there's a lot more, okay, there are more. The big two are, of course, Dolores Huerta and Emma Tenayuca, La Apasionada. Now, I think that over the course of time, the image and the attention that we've given Cesar Chavez, or that everybody has given Cesar Chavez, has kind of put Dolores Huerta back in the background. When Dolores Huerta, I think, is really one of the most powerful Mexican American civil rights women. Not only in that, but she also spoke out against machismo and all the above. Her and Cesar Chavez, from what I understand, and friends of mine have told me, individuals that work with Cesar Chavez before he passed away in '93, said that they did not get along with each other. But uh, uh, she was very, very important in the founding of the NWFA, the National Farm Workers Association. Um, I always get these acronyms mixed up, but that is an organization that is led by, Huerta and Cesar Chavez. And since we're talking about him, let's talk about him first. Cesar Chavez was born in Arizona, and his concern was migrant farm labor, especially in Delano. They protest grapes. I remember going to the HEB in South Texas, and a person coming up to my grandmother, Rosa. This is a long time ago. It's probably like 11 years old when this happened, and giving her a little deal. And she remember her saying, "Yes, we will not buy grapes," because farm workers were being paid horrible wages. I think it's $1.20 a day, $2 a day for being in the field, 12, 14 hours. They were being sprayed with chemicals. They lived in horrible conditions. The children of these individuals could not go to school for a full year. I used to always wonder when I used to go to Clark Elementary, why are these really cool kids that I like, only come to school for a certain time, and then they're here in the fall and in the winter, and then right after winter, come February, the end of February, they were gone, and it's because they were going to go start their picking migration wherever it may be. And I never understood that. It's horrible work, and a lot of these individuals are not able to advance because at the middle of the school year they take them out and they actually work in the fields. So Cesar Chavez was, I'm not going to say that he wasn't concerned with what was going on in Texas or that he wasn't concerned with what's going on in New Mexico and Arizona, but he was concerned with what's going on in California. So that is like one autonomous movement of farm workers there. Now, once he got things done, then those ideas were spread to Texas and the Southwest. Of course, it was going to help in the long run, but it wasn't like he had direct communications, all the time with Texas. He had his own problems in California. For example, I mean, if we look at an individual like Reyes Lopez Tijerina, which I consider to be among the most radical of Mexican American Chicano civil rights activists. I mean, this guy sequestered a courthouse and I believe shot a deputy. I always forget what he shot, but he was for uh, uh, land rights in New Mexico, ancestral land rights in the Tierra Maria, and they called him King Tiger, and he would give some really fiery speeches. He was of limited education. He was self-taught. He lived in very poor and squalid conditions, but he was a very charismatic speaker. And I had an opportunity to meet him one time. Dr. Jose Angel Gutierrez uh, wrote a book about him, and we were going to have an opportunity to meet them. And I don't remember what happened, but I was not able to. Another thing that I may mention, like Cesar Chavez died at 66. I think Reyes Lopez Tijerina was 75 when he died. Uh, so a lot of these individuals, and Corky Gonzalez, I think, was 76. They died early because they worked so freaking hard, you know. So they weren't with us for a long time. I believe Dr. Jose Angel is 75, so I hope he doesn't go anywhere soon. So Rey Lopez Tijerina was concerned with land grants. And now Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez was a boxer. That's how he dealt with his issues of being bullied around. And he was a political activist. Okay, he was a political activist, and he that he eventually he goes to the first La Raza Unida Party convention in El Paso, and of course there he tangles with Jose Angel Gutierrez on who's going to become the president of LRUP, La Raza Unida Party. Uh, of course, Corky Gonzalez wrote a poem called "I Am Joaquin." It's a very good poem, very touching poem. And he was always an activist, but he believed in that Mexican Americans should not join Democratic or Republican parties. He believed uh, that they should be under one single party, La Raza Unida Party. And with those things said, that created a lot of problems with them. Now, one of the things that happens, one of the reasons that so many Mexicans, especially like Rodolfo Croqui Gonzalez, did not like the idea of having being in different parties is because of what Kennedy did to Mexican Americans in 1963. I mean, Mexican Americans came out in record numbers to vote for John F. Kennedy in Viva Kennedy clubs. And we even have, Jackie Onassis Kennedy speaking in broken English. Voten por mi esposo, el candidato político democrático. So Mexicans come out and they vote in like huge numbers for John F. Kennedy. Some people say they even got him elected in one of the closest elections, the Kennedy-Nixon election. And then they receive very few crumbs of the political pie. They didn't even get like a little piece. They got very little crumbs. So that really bummed out. And that's one of the reasons that I think that Mexican Americans don't come out and vote in record numbers. They just don't trust them. We're sometimes called the ambivalent minority. I don't think we're ambivalent. I think that they just don't trust anybody. Um, and for those of you that do want it, Mexican Americans are not going to elect anybody of any real political power to the Senate or to the office of the presidency until we get together and vote as a homogenous group, just the way African Americans did from Barack Obama. I mean, they didn't come out and say, hey, we're not going to vote for him because his mom was white, or we're not going to do this because of this. They just said, that's as close to an African American that we're going to get, and we're all going to vote for him in throngs. And that's what they did. And Mexican Americans tend not to do that. We don't tend to fall in love with candidates. Um, okay, now let's talk about Jose Angel Gutierrez. And of course, he is my favorite, and he'll get mad because he'll say, "Don't be patronizing me. Me cae gacho eso." He's not only was only my professor, one of the hardest professors I ever had, probably the hardest professor I ever had, but he is also my friend. I haven't spoken to him in a while. He's no longer at UTA. He's in California, and he was from Crystal City. His father died at a very young age, and he had to work in the fields. And he very quickly found out when he was getting his master's in political science and then later on his law degree, that we were being marginalized. And he does lead a successful campaign a couple of times to win elections in Crystal City. But the problem is that he, as what he's told me, is they needed more than that. And uh, in Crystal City, right around 85 to 90% of the population there was Mexican American, but they only had one Mexican cheerleader. So there was all these problems there. So they go to talk to the school board, and the school board doesn't listen. So they start doing walkouts. And the walkouts there are going to be like the walkouts in California that are spearheaded by Sal Castro, which is another Mexican American great that recently passed away. Absolutely wonderful guy. So Jose Angel, Dr. Jose Angel right away figures out that you've got to hit the school where it hurts, and it's where the money. Students don't go to school, and they don't get any money. So once those trends start, then they begin to take hold. Like I said, I took undergraduate and graduate classes with Dr. Angel, and I became incredibly militant under him. But unlike Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez, he believes that Mexican Americans should coalesce with a political party that is best going to help them or suit them, and in this case, the Democratic Party of today. Um, One of the last conversations that I had, and it was an interview for the Star Telegram, is where they asked him, what work do you have left? And he actually turned to me and he said, well, it's up to them now, and now I find myself looking at other individuals, Mexican American individuals that are younger than me, and saying, well, it's now your turn to take over the deal. Also, Jose Angel Gutierrez was very militant. He is famous for the Kill the Gringo speech, with pretty much what Stokely Carmichael said. I'm not going to beg the white man for anything that I have coming to me. I'm just going to take it. And he basically said, well, the white man gets in front of my progress, then I'm going to get rid of him. I'm going to get what I need, and they translated into him killing. And I'm pretty sure he didn't mean that. Okay. Let's talk about, we talked about Dolores Huerta, who is still alive, and from what I understand. I had an opportunity to meet her recently, but I chose not to because, I just didn't feel, I mean, I know enough about her, but, I don't want to go and look at her as a relic or some kind of, I don't know, you know what I mean, right? Um, let's talk about Emma Tenayuca, pecan sheller strike. I really like Emma. Okay, I actually like Emma Tenayuca more than I like Dolores Huerta because of her fiery intellect, and she was a teacher. And again, she died young because she worked herself to death. But she was the closest thing to a woman warrior, soldadera, that the Mexican American civil rights movement will have. And they used to use women in San Antonio. She's from San Antonio, Texas. And they used to use women to pick pecans because of their hands, right? They can manipulate things. When I tell my wife, you untie this for me or tie this for me because my hands fumble. And she did the same thing, that more or less the same thing that Cesar Chavez did in California, but she did it in San Antonio for pecan shelling. And pecan shelling was done by hand. And I strongly recommend that you read about her. And she was very small, petite figure, just like I forgot her name. I'm sorry, Dolores Huerta. Uh, uh, so a lot of people see these women as that they're not capable of. But I've left a lot of things out about the Mexican American civil rights movement. Okay, a lot of things. I mean, there's just Raul Salazar, a reporter that was killed, by a canister of tear gas. But this is a survey class. If you're interested more in Mexican American history, take my Mexican American history class, and we'll do that. But um, I'm going to try and see about it. After Jose Angel Gutierrez, we do have individuals that spearhead civil rights movement. But I would say that those individuals are limited to professors like Américo Paderes and Roberto Treviño and Christian Soloninsky, and we have Roberto Calderon and UNT, and we also have I forgot his first name, Dr. Zamora at UT Austin. That's a lot. I forgot a lot. Andres Tijerina and David Montejano. I mean, I can just sit here and name a bunch of women and a bunch of women too. Okay, we do have a lot of women artists and musicians like Ana Cisneros and Sandra. No, it's Sandra Cisneros and Ana. I forgot her name. I'm sorry, but it's late in the evening. But it's Sandra Cisneros and Ana Castillo. Okay, Ana Castillo. And we have other women that have also been very important in moving us forward. But I firmly believe, one of the things that I learned from Dr. Jose Angel and Dr. Roberto Trevino and Christian Soloniski is that the only way that Mexican Americans are going to make a difference is through education. The way that anybody is going to make a difference is through education. And then through education, you get involved in politics and then you make changes in policy. Okay. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of women are becoming attorneys now, and those women are going to make policy. Actually, men becoming attorneys is on a decline, and women are becoming attorneys is on another. We just had to deal with attorneys in an estate case, and all of the attorneys that helped us were all women. It was a firm that was run by women. So I'm telling you, brown women out there, political science, become an attorney. Trust me, it works. Um, but anyway, and again, as I said before, education, education, education. A couple of more tidbits about that. Only 1 in 6 Mexican American males that starts college finishes. When it comes to females, it's the other way around, and it's 6 out of 10 that finish. So that'll tell you something. Um, so we are moving forward, but we still have a lot of work. And I'm in my mid 50s, so it's now time for all of you to do it. Tomorrow I'll bring the counterculture, which is a hippie movement. I had one student one time ask me, "Well, Mr. V, did the white kids do anything?" Well, of course they did. They did do. They helped African Americans with a bunch of things, and they started this Student for Democratic Society, and they started SNCC, uh, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and a lot of other cool things. So we'll talk about them, women, and Native Americans tomorrow. Unfortunately for Native Americans, it's a small snippet. For women, we have a lot of other cool cases. And then I may do the hippie movement and women all together, or may do all three of them. You all take care. I've gone over. I'm trying to keep these short, but they seem to be 20 minutes long all the time. You all take care. Be kind to each other, and wear your protective gear.